Good evening, everyone. I would like to give honor to God, Bishop McCullough, the executive pastors Brian Nadine McKenzie, overseers Patricia McLeod and Robin Edwards, our ministry leader, Pastor Diane Singho, and all of you, the people of God. We welcome you to our Barnabas class. Our theme this year is the disciples of Christ. And last month, Reverend Anthony Jackson, taught and walked us through the life of Philip. We learned who Philip was, his strengths, weaknesses, and convictions. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, for such a wonderful and impactful teaching. We will never forget who Philip was, and our lives will never be the same after learning about his contribution to Christendom as a disciple of Christ. This month, I am presenting to you another disciple of Christ. Also for this month, everyone gets to participate. Yes. You may ask, what do you mean, Reverend Jackie? And I would say to you, that's a good question. And as we move forward, you will see what I mean. But for now, I want to go over the outline for tonight and for the rest of the month. Yes. Note the outline for each week. On February the 7th, which is tonight, the topic up for discussion is, who is Thaddeus? On February the 14th, we will examine and unpack the question Thaddeus poses to Jesus. On February the 21st, we will come back with Jesus' response to Thaddeus. And for our last class on February the 28th, we will discuss how to apply everything we've learned to our daily lives as disciples of Christ. So, as mentioned in the outline, the topic up for the discussion tonight is, who is Thaddeus? The Bible doesn't say much about this disciple, Thaddeus, but in studying, I found that tradition had a lot to say about him. I also found that there are some discrepancies surrounding Thaddeus' name and who he actually was. So to help with learning about the disciples Thaddeus, I came across a video from Jesus Leadership Training by Greg Gaines titled, Who Was Thaddeus in the Bible? And I thought the first portion of the video would be beneficial for the type of class we're having this evening. Moving forward, we'll see. Yes, we are having a panel discussion. Panel discussion with Reverend Jackie. Yes, so instead of us having our usual teaching, for the month of February, we'll be having a panel discussion. Now listen to me. I am super excited to be your moderator for this panel discussion. And I want to encourage everyone on the Zoom and other social media platforms to please do not be intimidated and hold back your participation because it's a panel discussion. Even if this is your very first discussion, I am inviting you to join on the discussion with us. Listen, a panel discussion is simply a group of people gathered together to discuss a topic in front of an audience, which is what we'll be doing tonight and the rest of the month. So I'm asking you to bring your questions, your thoughts, your knowledge, and your voice, and let us unpack together who this next disciple is. If you don't want to be vocal, you can type it in the chat, Zoomers, or in the comment box, YouTubers. We are in this together. Let's have fun. Okay, just before I show the video, I want to echo something Reverend Jackson said last month when he gave the definition for the term disciples. And then I want to give the difference between a disciple and an apostle. Moving forward, I have the definitions. Moving forward to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide has, yes, thank you, media. So we have disciple versus apostle. And that Greek word for a disciple is learner or follower. And Reverend Jackson went over that last month. And you can find that in Matthew 4:19. Jesus, you see Jesus constantly saying, come, follow me. When he was speaking to some of the disciples in the beginning time, you'll hear about that later in the year. He said, come, follow me. So a disciple is someone who follows, right? A disciple is someone who follows. And then you have the Greek word for apostle, which is to send out. And you can read that in Mark 6 through 13. And Jesus sends out the 12. So what is an apostle? An apostle is someone who represents or is a messenger. Ultimately, an apostle is a person who was chosen and authorized by Jesus to spread the gospel. And we can also find this in the Bible in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. In the NLT, it says, so we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. So an apostle is someone who is sent out by God, by Christ, and they do what he did, and they say what he said, what they learned from him. All right. So that's basically the difference between the disciple and an apostle as we move forward. I wanted to read Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, but not the entire 1 through 5. I want to break it up. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 10, verse 1, 2a, 3b, and 5a. Here beginneth the reading of God's holy word. And when he had called his 12 disciples, meaning Jesus, to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Verse 2. Now the names of the disciples, of the 12 apostles, are these. Verse 3, because I want to speak about the person I'm speaking about tonight. Barnabas, whose surname was Thaddeus, these 12 Jesus sent out. And since we are talking about Thaddeus, I wanted to bring out those particular verses so that when we ask questions, we'll know that we're biblically correct. Now, tonight, I want to show you a video. And this video, I want you to take notes. I want you to listen carefully. Now, remember, this video that this video that I'm showing you is not all biblical based. It's a lot of traditions in it. So just take notes so that you can answer some questions or even just have a discussion on what you hear, what you see. And I want everybody, while she's getting that together, just to join, take your notes and stuff like that. I want everybody to participate when the floor is open. And the people who are on YouTube, if you have anything you would like to contribute, please feel free to put it in your comment box, and it will be read and even answered. But we want everybody to participate because it's a panel discussion. And we don't want anybody to feel left out. And don't think your answer is wrong. Just let's join in. We're here to help each other.
Are you hearing the audio?
I'm sorry? We know quite some.
Did you hear the audio?
I can't hear it.
Video?
No.
Okay.
Can you guys hear it?
No, ma'am.
All right. Just give us a minute. Everybody on Zoom and everybody on YouTube, give us 1 minute. Technical difficulties usually happen. We give room for that. Renata, can you get it on your end?
I'm trying to pull up the email in 1 second.
While they're looking for that, I thought it was quite interesting, this disciple Thaddeus.
Vertical bar Thaddeus.
Okay,
The Bible,
there we go.
a trove of profound narratives, is replete with intriguing characters.
We started
One
from the
such
beginning.
figure, often overlooked, is Thaddeus, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. Yet, the question persists, who was Thaddeus in the Bible? A man of many names, including Lebbaeus and Judas, not Iscariot. Thaddeus's story is marked by steadfast faith, selfless service, and an enduring legacy. Despite the scant attention he receives, understanding Thaddeus's journey gives us invaluable insights into the early Christian community and the apostolic mission. So, let's venture into the biblical past, unraveling the mystery and recognizing the unique contributions of Thaddeus. Who was Thaddeus in the Bible? The unsung hero. What's in a name? That's a question for the ages, isn't it? When we delve into the pages of the Bible, we often come across names that spark curiosity. Thaddeus is one such name, a figure shrouded in mystery. The query, who was Thaddeus in the Bible, is often left unanswered or given a quick pass over. This article is set to change that. We're not just scratching the surface here, folks, we're going deep. Unraveling the mystery. How many apostles did Jesus have? Jesus, disciples, Christ. The Bible mentions a man named Thaddeus in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark. He is one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, but not much is known about him. Who was Thaddeus and what do we know about him from the Bible? In this blog, we explore the identity of Thaddeus and the importance of his story in Christian history. Where does the Bible mention Thaddeus? The Bible mentions Thaddeus only twice. He is mentioned in Matthew 10:3 and Mark 3:18. In both places, Thaddeus is included in the list of the 12 apostles of Jesus. While the Bible provides some information about Thaddeus, also known as Lebbaeus or Judas son of James, it does not offer many details about his life and deeds. Most of what we know about him comes from tradition and non-canonical sources. Here's a table that outlines the main events and aspects of his life as suggested by both biblical accounts and various traditions. Event details call to discipleship according to the New Testament. Thaddeus was one of the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus to follow him and spread his teachings. Matthew 10:2-4, Mark 3:16-19, Luke 6:13-16, Acts 1:13. The Last Supper. Thaddeus was present at the Last Supper, as depicted in the Gospel of John, John 13:23, 21:20. In some artistic representations of the Last Supper, he is often shown as the figure sitting to the right of Street James the Less. Post-resurrection. Following the
Thank you. I'm so, this the devil. I can't find my information. I'm so sorry. But anyway, next slide. I only see Lenata on here. All righty then. Okay. So the question is, first of all, the video I thought was very informative. I mean, we could have gone a little deeper, but when I say deeper, there are probably many videos out there on Thaddeus. I doubt it because it's not much that the Bible actually says about him. But I have some questions. You heard the video and you did your own research. What scriptures reflect Thaddeus is called to be a disciple and apostle? Anybody can chime in. When you did your research, where did you find that he was actually called to be a disciple of Christ and an apostle?
I believe Matthew 10, 2-4.
You want to read that?
Oh. Okay. Hold on one second. I didn't get it. Matthew 10, verses 2-4. And I'm reading it out of the Legacy Bible. Matthew 10, 2-4. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. The first, Simeon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. And there's also another one, which is Acts 1 and 13. You want me to read that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, Acts 1, chapter 1, and verse 13. And when they had entered the city, they went up to the upper room where they were staying. That is Peter and John, James and Matthew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew. I'm sorry, let me start over. It was Peter and John, and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James. So I guess his name was Judas here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is that it? Anybody else got a scripture, or is that it?
There's also Mark 3, verses 16 to 19.
Okay, read it.
Mark 3, starting with verse 16, here begins the reading of God's holy word. And Simon he surnamed Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the son of thunder, and Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas, and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him, and they went into a house.
So how many names does Thaddeus have? He has a lot of names, seem like, right? He could be called the disciple of many names. How many names did you read off so far?
Hi, this is Reverend Karstine. How are you? Good evening to all. Can you hear me?
Yes, Reverend Karstine.
Hey, just checking. There were a lot of names that came up. The translation of Thaddeus in certain documents is a dear of heart or man of heart. And again, Judas, but not Judas Iscariot, because the Bible wanted to make the distinction, of course, between the one who actually betrayed Jesus, but Thaddeus was a faithful man. And even though we don't know a lot, we know that he was elevated to the position of apostle, which is, of course, a sign that Jesus's kiss was upon his life in terms of executing his purpose.
Exactly. And I wanted to piggyback off of Reverend Karstine, because although the Bible does not say a lot about Thaddeus, and tradition does say a lot about him, one of the things she said was his name, that Thaddeus' name means heart or courageous. And sometimes, back in the days when people would name their kids, they would try to name them based on their personality or something like that. And I could just imagine, it doesn't say this in the scripture, I'm just, and putting it in my head as I was studying, if his name means heart and courageous, I can only imagine he must have been a bold and courageous disciple in my mind, in my mind's eye. But that was the name, the meaning of his name. And Karstine mentioned something too about Judas. It's interesting because tradition uses Judas, and short for Judas, they use Jude, Jude. And so then there was conflicts with Jude in the book of Jude. So he has a lot of names. And if we're not careful, we really have to study it, really attentively, because you can get confused. And we know he's not Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus. But it's interesting that he had a role to play. Thaddeus had a role to play. He had an assignment from the Lord. And how do we know this? Even though we may not see him like Matthew, Mark, and all of the rest of the disciples that have the names and stuff like that, what's in the name? Because he's not, bigged up like those names, you kind of want to ask the question, does this mean because he wasn't mentioned a lot in the Bible, does it mean that he was an insignificant disciple? Any takers? Because his name was, yeah, go ahead.
I would say no, because the fact that he's in the Bible, it testifies to what the Lord was doing with his life and how he was being used mightily. He's called an apostle. So the office itself gives merit to what he can do, or was appointed to do rather. So even though he's not mentioned a lot, that doesn't take away the weight of his assignment. It's just that it's not documented as much. That's how I understand.
Right. Anybody else?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Also, I was reading that his name could also be the Greek name Theodore, which they say means gift of God. And so that also, gives relevance to him, like the sister said, he's an apostle, and it's so amazing that he would be named possibly gift of God. So that pulls a lot of weight with.
Okay, any other takers?
Missionary Carmen had her hand up, then Sister Sheila.
Okay,
Reverend
I can't see, so please call on them if they have their hands up, please.
All right.
No, I
Missionary
was just
Carmen, I think,
agreeing. I was just agreeing with what, thank you, Sister Lunata. I was just agreeing with what Sister Kayla mentioned, that pretty much it wasn't the person, it was the fact that Jesus called him and Jesus saw something in him. So even though not much is known about him, he is an important figure.
Okay, any other takers? I would like
Sister
to
Sheila.
go ahead.
I guess it's just like repetitive, Reverend Jackie, but it's not so much the documentation that or the length of the documentation, the fact that he was called by Jesus to do work, and he followed him for 3 years. And the Bible and other sources say that he was a dedicated follower of Jesus for 3 years.
Okay,
So it doesn't have any, the length of what was written about him has nothing to do with his significance in the New Testament.
it's almost just like the Bible. Some of them you have long prophet scriptures, and you have the short one. Doesn't mean that they were lesser. What I love about the significance of a name or the person, sometimes we can't, and we just bringing it back to us today. When we look at our names not being blasted on a billboard, and when we're not bigged up, and we're not, affirmed in such a way, because that affirms some people. It affirms some people to have my names blasted, Matthew, oh, I'll take his class. John, oh, I'm taking his class. Thaddeus, who? But he is not a nameless, faceless disciple at all. He was in some strategic places where Jesus and the other disciples were. Like, can you name one place that he was at least? Where was he? He was in the upper room, right? He was in the upper room. He was visible and on sight among the other disciples when Jesus was taken into heaven, right? He was in some key places. He was a disciple that went out. Tradition, even though the Bible doesn't say a lot about Thaddeus, right? The Bible doesn't say a lot about him. But here's what tradition does say. So the Bible doesn't tell us about his journey, other than he was empowered to preach the gospel, heal the sick, cast out demons, right? So I would agree with tradition when it says Thaddeus' story gives us invaluable insight into the early Christian community and the apostolic mission. I believe that because in the scriptures that you guys just read, it's repeated that when Jesus went up into the mountain, he called his disciples to himself. One of the things he did, he had already trained them. He had already taught them, right? And now he's taking them and he's sending them out, which makes them apostles, right? When they go out, they're going to do what they saw him do. Thaddeus got to experience seeing Jesus do miracles. Does the Bible say that? It doesn't come out and say that. But he was one of the 12, and the 12 followed Jesus. And so I'm sure he got to see the miracles of Jesus. And then he was sent on an assignment. Not only did he call them, right, apostles of his, not only did he send them out right away, But when we're reading this, what do we get from it? What do we get from it for ourselves? Okay, Bishop McCullough has some ordination services. She has elected and appointed some missionaries, junior missionaries, ministers, reverends, right? Pastors, overseers, right? When she ordains and elevate, why do you think she's doing this? She's been training us and still training us, right? I'm just bringing it to earth. She's been training us, still training us. And what are we doing with it? Are we just sitting on it? See, Thaddeus was called by Jesus to be an apostle, to be a disciple, and he went out and he healed. He cast out demons, right? He was out there preaching the gospel. He didn't just get ordained. One of the scriptures said Jesus ordained them. And so when they were ordained, set apart for service. What are you doing? What am I doing? What are we doing? Are we just having these ordination services just to look good? What do we do after the ordination service? Do we come to Bible study? Do we take classes? Do we learn from our disciple? Because Jesus is our disciple. But now we have another one. We got teachers in the Bible college. We got our bishop. We got our reverends and pastors. We're learning across the board. But what are we doing? Are we teaching? Are we preaching? Are we evangelizing? Do we do hospital visits? Any takers?
Yes, what you just asked me reminds me of what what's his name? Minister, I forgot his title, but I think it's Reverend or Pastor T. Cedric Brown said, like the last words in his 3 words in his book, The Ministry of the Towel, where he said title or towel,
Wow.
choice to make as a servant, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be serving. We're supposed to be co-laborers with Jesus and with the bishop, helping the bishop, like Aaron and Hur did Moses when they were fighting, when Joshua was fighting, keep her hands lifted up to spread the gospel. That's what our job is. We're born to worship God and enjoy him forever. And we got to spread the good news about Jesus. So it just reminded me of that, of being a servant. So the question is, are we really being servants of God, or are we just taking these titles? That's what it reminded me of when you said that. We want to be servants and we want God to be pleased with us.
Absolutely. I want to read Mark, and maybe I think somebody read it, but I want to read it again. Mark chapter 3, and I want to read 13, 14, 15, and some of 18. And it says this. It says, and he, meaning Jesus, goeth up into a mountain and calleth unto him whom he would, and they came unto him. And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sickness, and to cast out devils. And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, he was there. Now, I want to, Pastor Trish may have said this last week, I think, or maybe the last 2 weeks. And this is crucial to know and to remember, that not all disciples were apostles, but all apostles were disciples, right? The apostles were the what they call it, the creme de la cream of Jesus' followers, spreading his message. This is what I'm bringing to the table with me and you, with you and me. We are licensed ministers. Some of us are ordained, some of us may not be licensed already, but you're a student of the word. You are a student. You are a disciple of Christ. You go into the hospital, that's a given opportunity to minister to someone, to tell them about Jesus. You don't have to have a paper, a license paper or ordination paper to minister to somebody in the hospital, somebody on the train, on the bus, somebody at the supermarket. That's an open opportunity for you to be you to be the disciple and to disciple other people that they may become disciples. So what am I saying? God ordained these 12. He ordained Thaddeus. Thaddeus is not a no-name disciple. He's not a, nameless, faceless disciple. He is a disciple of Christ that did what Christ ordained him to do. He went out and he did what God sent him forth to do. It was interesting. I was talking to Pastor Diana, and she was talking about the ambassador, being ambassadors for Christ. The thing about being ambassadors for Christ is that when we go out, we are to do exactly what he says to do. We don't make up our own stuff, right? We don't teach in error, or we don't preach in error, or we do exactly what Christ says. If Christ is gonna, he sent them out. There's a slide I have here. Go to the next slide, Kayla. Yeah, Luke 10:1, it talks about how Jesus sent them out in twos, right? He sent out 70 kids, he was 72 of them, and then he sent out the 12 disciples as well in twos. And you can find that in Luke 10:1. But what's interesting here is that, wonderful, here beginneth the reading of God's holy word. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place whither he himself would come. What's interesting about this, if we look at it, most of us don't like to work with another person. We have issues with people. Some of us are glory hoggers. Some of us only want the credit for ourselves, that I won this soul, I did this. But Jesus sent them out in twos. You know why? Because, and it's just like in Deuteronomy, it talked about, and 2 or 3 more witnesses, right? And so, somebody like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all can talk about the same story, but in each one of them, there's a little bit something different in the story. Well, when you send them out in twos, it's safety. We always want to be, a one-man show. No, we got to learn to work with people, because Jesus sent them out in twos. He could have sent out one of them, right, if he wanted to, but he sent them out in twos. So we need to learn to get along with each other. We need to learn to work with each other. We need to learn to do ministry with each other, because that's how Jesus would want us to do it. He sent them out in twos. If I'm going to the hospital, it's different if I'm going to the hospital and I just passing by. But if I'm really going to minister and serve communion, I shouldn't go by myself. I should go with one of the other junior missionaries, one of the ministers. I should be going with you guys. We should go together to minister. What are we doing? He said to his disciple, he said, what is it called? The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. When he was sending them, he needed more laborers. And here we are getting fed off the word. We're sitting in church Sunday after Sunday on Zoom, Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday after Wednesday, Friday after Friday. And what are we doing with what we're getting? Are we going out and giving it out? Are we reaching souls? Are we witnessing? Are we telling people about Jesus? People out there dying, not just from physical death. People are dying because they are spiritually depraved. And they don't have no hope because we are not out there evangelizing. We are not out there doing soul winning. I took a soul winning class years ago, and we need to be soul winners. We need to be out there being disciples for Christ. And it's funny because there's a scripture, I don't have it, if you could pull it up. It says something about, remember the disciples were kind of fighting and saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom? Who's the greatest? Who is the greatest? We're crying about who is the greatest in the sanctuary. Who is the greatest with Bishop? Who is the greatest with Popo? Who is the greatest? The greatest is the person who have a heart to serve. The greatest is the person who goes beyond himself, pick up his cross and follow Jesus. He said, if you can't pick up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of me. Any takers?
Reverend Karstein.
For 1 second. Is Reverend Crystal still on? Reverend Crystal, you had a question. Your hand.
I'm sorry, Diane, I can't see nobody. I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
know. That's why we helping you. We
Thank
helping you.
you.
Crystal, if you still have your question, whatever that was, you want to pose it, please.
Yes, please, Crystal. I want to hear it.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Listen, I didn't have a question. I was just commenting. I can comment even regarding what Reverend Jackie was just saying. I mean, amen and absolutely. The disciples, when they received the charge from Christ, you know, they had to obey, and it's tradition, going back to tradition with Thaddeus, I guess. See, I'm going to stick with what's already been talked about. I don't want to broach anything or move ahead of you, Reverend Jackie. So, you know, I guess to the point what you were talking about, obscurity and attention, you know, the fact that Thaddeus was there, he was deputized by Jesus to go out and cast out devils and to go out 2 by 2. It really speaks to the fact that there is work done behind the scenes that many of us will never know about until we get to heaven. You know, there's so many things in the marketplace. There are things even, you know, I believe in hope, and I take your challenge, Reverend Jackie, even to do more. But there's so many things, so many encounters. I even had an encounter this week at work. The Lord saw it, but none of you would know about it because it didn't take place in the sanctuary. As far as you guys know, I just usher, right? But but there's so many things. And so I just thank you for that, for, you know, looking for just doing that introspection and that internal inventory, because at the end of the day, it's only what we do for Christ that will last. You know, when you said the thing about Thaddeus isn't insignificant, I thought about how this, you know, basically Thaddeus, the Gospels were written for a purpose. And the purpose was to tell others about Jesus Christ, different communities. And so because of that, maybe the works that Thaddeus did, well, they obviously didn't lend to the telling of Jesus's narrative. But at the same time, it doesn't mean, you know, that what he did was wrong. And so I guess in our culture, we think, like you said, Reverend Jack, in our culture, we think attention equals significance, but that obviously is not the case. So thank you. That was it.
Thank you for sharing that. Before I call on Reverend Christine, you know what I thought about what Crystal was saying. You know, when we think about the word significance, and so many of us we're on a hunt and a search for significance. I can see you guys now. We are on we're hunting, we're searching, we're fiending, we're hungry for significance. And what we don't realize is that the significance is this. Do you know when you win a soul to Christ, that's like a crown on your star on your crown? That makes me feel good when I have witnessed to somebody, some drunken person on the street, and they're crying because they're drunk, but they gave their life to the Lord and they remain saved. That means a lot to me than somebody giving me recognition. Listen, we just had a graduation, right? And I graduated. And one of the things I said at the graduation when we were praying, it was Junior Missionary Lanard and all of us in a circle praying. And one of the things I prayed about is that I don't want this paper to just be a paper. I want to do what I got this degree to do. And it's the same principle about being ordained. What are you ordained to do? If you're ordained to teach, then teach. If God called you to preach, then preach. If God called you just to be a walking disciple out in the street, then be the walking disciple out in the street. But don't just sit there waiting for somebody to ordain you, you don't be noble. Don't be a good Christian just so you could be recognized to be the next candidate to be ordained. No, because to get ordained and sit in the seat is a waste. It is a waste. And I'm just saying it's a waste. Christine?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for been a great discussion. Just wanted to add, in reference to the last statement you made, there's a scripture in Luke chapter 9, verses 49 through 50, and I've always loved this text. Here begins the reading of God's holy word. And John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him because he followeth not with us. And Jesus said unto him, Forbid him not, For he that is not against us is for us. So far the scripture. And I just think this speaks so powerfully to us setting lines of demarcation and trying to leave other people out. But they were actually casting it out in Jesus' name. And they were not attacked by the enemy, the devil. The devil didn't jump on them because they were for Jesus. They were doing it in the right context, in the right calling, in the power and authority that Jesus Christ gave them to operate and do it. And it's so powerful because the disciples now wanted them to stop doing it, and they tried to forbid them, but Jesus corrected them and said, no, 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 no. If they're for me, we're all one. So he was like, get it straight. So we got to stop looking for the clap from Pookie and Pookie, because Pookie didn't give me the clap. Pookie gave me a thumbs down. But did Jesus say do it? Then do it according to his will and his purpose. As long as we're not violating the boundaries of Jesus Christ, we're to walk in his authority and power. Say what he says, not what we think, not my opinion, not my own take on it, not my understanding. That's how we're supposed to walk. And those mark us as true disciples of Christ.
Thank you, Reverend Karstein. Before I call on Carmen, I saw your hand. You know, we should ask ourselves the question, could we be a Thaddeus? Could we really be honest with ourselves? Can we really be a Thaddeus? And why do I ask that question? You know, now the Bible doesn't say this, but tradition says that, you know, you kind of wonder, you know, he came on the scene, he was there, he was significant, he had significance, but how did he leave the scene? How did he die? Now, we know he did ministry work. We know he was sold out for Christ. We know that. How do we know he was sold out for Christ? Because Jesus said that if, and I'm paraphrasing, if you can't take up your cross and follow me, then you're not worthy of me. I don't know what Thaddeus was doing prior to Jesus calling him to become a follower of his, but I know he dropped all to follow Jesus. He had to, because Jesus, one disciple said, let me go bury, you know, my dead. He said, no, let the dead bury your dead. In other words, he's not being insensitive to the fact that you lost a family member, but what he's saying is, you know, put priority. What's priority? What's first? You know, and so look at this. Matthew chapter 24, verse 9, right? And it says, then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. And Philippians 1:29 said, for I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. Now, I thought this was interesting because tradition says that Thaddeus was martyred, right? Now, I don't know if that's true, but I know that the Bible said that you will suffer because of his name. I know that the Bible says that what I just read, that they will deliver you to be in tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations. So I don't know how Thaddeus left the scene. I don't know how he died. I know what tradition says. But one thing I want to say is, can I be a Thaddeus? Can I actually still do my work and my name is not bigged up? Can I actually still function in church and clean the bathroom properly and nobody give me a thank you? Can I actually come and usher and nobody, you know, say, you know what, Jackie really smiles, and when I know nobody thanked me for ushering at the door, and I let you in when it's cold and I got to let that door air be on me. Nobody do. Can I still function? Can I still preach the gospel when I get rebuked by my bigger, you know, because the student is not bigger than the master, right? So if I get rebuked by my leader, can I still show up? Can I still show up? As a disciple of Christ, I don't know about the disciples if they go through what we go through. We get pouty, we get upset, and we shut down for a season, and then we come back. Dude, I never read the Bible that said the disciples shut down because they had a mood swing. I never read the Bible. And so Thaddeus, to me, I don't know if I could be a Thaddeus, right? Now in my life, I think I can be a Thaddeus. What do I mean by that? I mean that my name does not have to be plastered. my name, it used to bother me if they didn't acknowledge my name. And I'm like, oh my God, they're acknowledging everybody else. I remember when I first started cleaning that pulpit and people used to get up there and acknowledge everybody. And then I'm like, what I look like, chopped liver? I'm up there wiping the pulpit down, call my name too. But God meant for that to happen because I needed that. Wait a minute, you ain't gonna be calling other people's name and don't call my name. You see, we get uptight when our names are not called. Don't lie, yes you do. It's a natural response. But we got to check it because Thaddeus' name is not blown up. As a matter of fact, his name is mentioned a couple of times in these Bible and the scriptures that y'all just read. But look at all of the books of the Bible that we have, and he's only mentioned then. But he still held great significance for the kingdom, for the Christian society. Pastor Diane, I hand it over to you. God bless you.
Come on, let's put our hands together and thank Reverend Jackie. This was powerful. Oh boy, you know, it's time to go, but you know, once we start talking, y'all know we can go on and on. Y'all know that, right? And I just love the way she laid out this PowerPoint. Go back and look at it again. And I love the questions that she posed to us to bring it home to our reality, right? Can we be a Thaddeus? I mean, come on now, you know, that's for some introspection. That's introspection. So we got to go home after this. Let's go back over these questions, right? But I think some of the key things that she mentioned that was so powerful, he was a disciple. Jesus called him. Jesus ordained him, which means he set him apart, right? He gave them authority, like she said, to cast out demons, unclean spirits, and to preach the gospel. Isn't that what it's all about? Us preaching Jesus? Isn't that, I mean, my God, what greater significance do we want? See? What greater?
Pastor Diane, can I just interject one more thing?
Yeah.
And I didn't hear the Bible say anything about a comparison spirit. A lot of times we can't function because your name was mentioned 50 times and mine was only mentioned 3. Just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's very true. What it deals with is a lot of self-introspection. And this comes really with your relationship with the Lord, basically. It really does. No one can do it for you. She can lay out the information so beautifully like she did. We can go back and look at the scriptures. But guess what? This is between us and the Lord. He called us, he chose us. And she said, what are we doing with this? You understand? Whatever part we're supposed to play in the kingdom, we should play. It is not a comparison, because remember, God, this is the other thing, God has to grace you for an assignment. God has to grace you. And if you're not graced for it, need I fill in the blank? You know, you fill in your own blank. You fill in your own blank, because sometimes we think we can walk that situation. And when you get in it, you cannot. And so that's something to think about. Be content, be satisfied. That's what she was saying, basically. Be satisfied with what God called you to do. You know, walk in it. This was so powerful. This was so powerful. And guess what? It's going to come up. It's going to present itself to us tomorrow, the next day. Somebody going to push a trigger and boom, we might go there. But then you're going to remember this lesson. I'm going to remember the lesson. I remember this lesson. I'm serious. I remember the lesson. I love the questions because, again, he wasn't mentioned in a significant way, but as she stated, it did not mean he was insignificant. You understand? Just the fact that Jesus chose him. Okay, just that fact, right? He chose him. Oh my gosh, to follow him and to be with him, not to be with him. See, to be with him, that's another situation. All right, we got to go, y'all. Carmen, you're gonna have to hold your question, missionary, till next week, because it's time to
All
go.
is well.
Time to go. YouTubers, social media, we're so glad that you joined us. We want you to come back next week as Reverend Jackie continues to unpack this life of Thaddeus. And we're so glad that you joined us. If you have any questions, you can email us at bethrapha.org. Any one of these teachers will be happy to answer you.